Hello, everyone, and welcome to CDCon 2021 and Alice and my talk, Moving Beyond CVEs, Why It's Important to Have a Strong Security Posture in Open Source. So who we are. Alice, would you like to go first?
Yes, so hi, I'm Alice. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect at Armory.
And I am Beth, and I am the Spark at Themist. So what we are going to talk about today, so we're going to do a quick refresh, and by we, I mean I'm going to walk you through super fast, but I will take a breath maybe about the talk that I did last year. And then we're going to talk about shifting left in the open source community as it relates to some of the foundation policy. We're going to talk about communication and a whole bunch of really good stuff. So I'm going to zoom through this because this is just refresh. Common vulnerabilities and exposures, those are all innocent until proven guilty. A common vulnerability scoring system is the scoring system that you use in order to identify the score that a CVE came with and whether or not that matches with everything that, and whether or not that matches with your application stack. And one of the ways that you do that is via a threat model. So the threat model essentially is the justification and making it defensible in order for you to decide if something is or is not a high rated CVE. After you do that, you decide, are you going to patch it? Are you going to document it? What are you going to do? And then all of that process kind of like tidies up and you move on to the next iteration. And that brings us to shifting left. So in this, what we're going to do is we're going to basically have a Q&A style as we go through, where I am the question and Alice is the answer. So first, let's start off talking about foundations. So in terms of if you're going to shift left the security bit, Alice, talk to us a little bit about what are some of the foundational pieces that someone might need.
So first of all, for OSS projects and any project, you need a security team, but more specifically, if you have an open source project, you would probably want to create a security SIG. So that way you can recruit the right people in security and other areas to help you define the process that you're going to need to follow for fixing different security things. And then obviously you need participation. Otherwise, if you don't have enough people helping this process along, it becomes very overly cumbersome and difficult for anyone to maintain.
And I've seen that in the past where you need like full teams. When you're talking about you need a wide variety of people to participate, you need a wide variety of people to participate. So let's talk about let's talk a little bit about what that process and how you would participate. I know you've had good experiences and bad experiences in the past, so walk us through what that looks like, or what. So walk us through that.
So when you don't have any security processes, like the problem comes that when you have, say, a 0-day vulnerability, or you have something that needs to be patched immediately, you end up in this mad scramble to figure out like what is it we need to do and who all the people you need to get involved to patch this vulnerability, and hope you have all those people available. And I really mean hope they're all available, because sometimes they're not. But if you actually have a process that is clearly defined, then it's much easier, because then one, like everybody knows about this process. And it's human readable, not just security readable. So basically you must use a plain language, because otherwise, like, operations doesn't understand what the security thing is, the developers doesn't understand what the security thing is, because security tends to have their own language about all things security. So, and then if you also explain like the whys and whatnots, like about the security, it makes it easier for everybody to help mitigate the security, like, because from their point of view, like mitigating a security risk means different things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So the other thing that we kind of talk about is the importance of deferring to the experts. So talk to me a little bit about what that is like. Is that just deferring to security people, or?
No, so it means like, say, if you have a security vulnerability that is related to, say, network or to your host machines, like typically then you should defer to your operations people or your network engineers or whatever, because they are the SME of that particular, like they are the experts in that particular field. So as long as like security can collaborate and tell them like what it is that they need to do and what the actual resolution should look like, or how do they determine the security risk has been resolved, then leaving it up to the experts to actually mitigate the risk is a much better plan overall, and less effort on everybody's part.
I like that. It's like actually working together as a team, which seems pretty handy.
It is.
So then the next thing we kind of talk about is the notion of guardrails. So if you have everyone who's the appropriate expert and you have those policies, then talk about why it's important to have guardrails.
So it's important to have guardrails so everybody knows like what they're doing, and also because like security, like there's tends to be a lot of rules like for security, right? And so not everybody's going to always remember all the rules. So when you have like guardrails in place, and especially if you have like policies as code, first of all, like anybody then can go view the policies and see like if they have questions, they can talk to their security engineers or whatnot. Or let's say like if your policies are actually implemented in your lower environments also, except maybe with it as a warning rather than a hard stop, then as the developers or operations engineers bump up against all these different policies, like they can then make the decision, hey, okay, this doesn't work for me, or oh, I just didn't know about this, and then change their behavior accordingly. So you get to you can mitigate a whole bunch of risks earlier in your development lifecycle especially if you implement like the policies as code and some of these other things earlier. So everybody gets used to it earlier. If you don't, then you end up with a gigantic fire in production, typically, like when things start going wrong or when things get accidentally deployed with too many permissions or too open to the world, and which then also the company then usually typically has a lot of security risks just from that one deployment.
Okay, awesome. That makes sense. And I feel like those things really tie into each other, where you're creating a level of automation for the policies, which I'm a big fan of, not reinventing the wheel and not keeping it all in my head. So the next one we have is scanning all the things. And this is kind of my favorite because I learned from you that there is more to scanning than just CVEs, that there's a whole lot of things that you need to scan, and there's a variety of reasons in which you need to scan them. And so it's a much bigger issue. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you need a scan because security involves many different aspects, right? It involves both like code, the application binary, if you don't have the code. It involves like the host that this application is on, whether it's like in a container or in a VM or some Lambda function or whatever. And it also includes things like, the network and, all the other things related to this application that's coming in. So like that basically has one application has essentially a lot of vectors that can possibly be attacked, right? And so all those like if you can scan as many of those vectors as possible, especially if you put this in an earlier part of your development process, then you can mitigate them at that time rather than waiting to find out like after something has been deployed and oh oops, like we have all these things that need to be fixed now, which then is a lot more difficult because sometimes you may or may not be able to mitigate those risks right away, right? And so yeah, so that's why there's like so many different scanning tools, and a lot of them is you can classify as infrastructure, such as like cloud, database, host, image scanning, networking, or it's like the application themselves, code scanning. But the one other thing with the applications is like licensing, because for public companies, like sometimes they actually have to know exactly which licenses, like their like all the different licenses that's involved in that one application that they created, because there's certain restrictions, right? For certain licenses. So that is typically added as part of the scanning regimen.
Okay. No, that and that makes sense. It turns out that I've never looked at it in that way. So that's I like it. That is super helpful. So as we're kind of coming in and talking about this, one of the things that the industry talks an awful lot about is the importance of shifting left. Everyone's all about how do you shift left. So what I've heard from you is one of the important things about shifting left is making sure that you have appropriate levels of collaboration. And you've kind of talked about that as we go through. So did you want to talk a little more about what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so you can't like you can't shift left, or you can't do anything earlier in development, right? If not everybody's kind of on the same page, right? So it's a thing like I was talking about earlier. Whereas when you find a security problem after something has gone to production, typically you're gonna spend a lot of like man hours and resources and everything to try to mitigate this risk, because you usually can't just turn off this application to mitigate this risk, right? Like there goes like probably $1 billion somewhere down the drain if you did that. But at the same time, like you cannot also just suddenly like say block a port or whatever, because who knows what else is going to happen if you do that. So if everybody collaborated earlier in the application's development lifecycle, then everybody, because everybody plays a part in making the application and therefore the deployment of this application secure, right? So application developers need to write good code. But in order to write good and secure code, they need the advice from their security experts to do this. Same with the operations people. They need to know from the developers like what all infrastructures needed to deploy this, but they also need to know from security like what all things that they have to mitigate like as they deploy this application into production, because sometimes there's network things or there's some other things that they need to do to completely mitigate the security risk or try to mitigate the security risk for this application. It's never going to go to zero, but it will. We can make it as low as possible. And the easiest way to do that is everybody collaborates, as early, so as far left in the development lifecycle as possible.
Right. No, and I like that. And I like the idea that with that shift left, the importance and the emphasis is really like the closer you get to writing actual code, really that's when it's cheap to make changes and to throw something away.
Yes.
Which is important. And I think we know that, but we don't know that. Like we know that logically, but putting all the parts and pieces together, it was really helpful for me to kind of hear about that from you. So then as we kind of walked through all the different things, from making sure that you have the appropriate process to scanning all the things, which I got to learn all about, and that level of collaboration and people having the right skill set, and that being so important, where, you know, developers should still innovate and create, and infrastructure people need to keep everything up and running, and security people have their level of expertise in terms of keeping things secure. So what are the things that, if you're new and you don't have a security posture and you're trying to do that shift left in the security world, what are some of the things that you can do to help build that?
So for an OSS project or any project, like if you don't have a security team, you need to get one pronto. So in an OSS project, you want to create a security SIG. So for, you know, whoever is most interested in doing security, and also recruit your security experts or some of your security experts to help create like the processes and policies and procedures for the project. And then of course you need, because you really need cross collaboration, you would also want to make sure you recruit like your the developers and the people that are interested in infrastructure and all the other kinds of experts that's needed for your project to collaborate in this security SIG. And then of course you yourself should try to contribute like whatever expertise you have, and then most importantly, ask questions. Without any questions, nobody knows what's going on, like with anything. So if you don't ask questions, then nothing's going to happen, basically.
Right. No, and I like that, because as I've seen a shift in security folks, and, you know, with the DevOps movement, that seems to be one of the things that's really important, is asking questions and really trusting people and their level of expertise. That is amazing. Thank you so much, Alice. So let's see. Oh, I think I went a little bit out of order. So in terms of the successfully shifting left, and I didn't go out of order. So we talked about what it is that we need in order to set everything up, but how do we make sure that we continue to be successful as we're going through? Because they're a little bit different. It's like, great, we have this process, and now what? So do you want to talk us through a little bit about that? Because I see some like pretty meaty things that people are going to need to do in order to make this possible.
Yeah, so it's not enough to just start up the security SIG, right? Like you also need to build it out. You need to build out the foundations, the policies, you know, your guardrails basically for the project. And then you need to actually execute on said processes, because just having the process there does nothing. Like if nobody executes on it, then nothing's happening, right? Like, and that means your product or your project is no more secure than it was yesterday when you didn't have the security SIG. Right. And then the other thing is like you want to, of course, improve on the process as you mature, because generally speaking, when you start security on any project, like your policies are either going to be overly broad or they're going to be oddly specific to certain things. And you don't necessarily, like there are cases where you want one or both or some mixture of it, but generally speaking, like a good setup is some combination of these different types of policies. Right. And then with it, like you want to ensure you have the proper tooling to tell you about these vulnerabilities or whatever, and make it as an automated process as possible. But also you want to make sure the process isn't overly burdensome for the people that need to fix these problems, because if you start out and blast people with like 100 CVE notifications like every other day, I can 100% guarantee you no one's going to be looking at them because they have no idea what they're going to be doing. Right. And the other thing is that, you know, you're going to create something that is well known called alert fatigue. Right. So people like the more things that they look at that doesn't, or they think doesn't relate to them, the less they're going to pay attention to said alerts and notification, right? So you would rather just, have like a alert or notification for something that's super critical at the very beginning of your project, and only a couple of them, like a week or however many you want to decide, and then slowly fix that over time, rather than, hey, I found like this 500 CVEs and let's fix them all. Like, that's going to be very difficult, and people are just not going to be. People just be overwhelmed, essentially,
right,
to be able to fix all that, right? And then lastly, like, because you're going to need everybody's help to fix these CVEs, not just the security people, not just developers, not just operations people, but all the different kinds of expertise that's required. Because sometimes there are security vulnerabilities that need a code fix and also need an infrastructure fix, or they need a database fix and they need like an application fix, and you need all the right people in order to make the fix.
Right. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense, because we are all connected and we all impact each other. So all working together and making security everybody's responsibility is how you can strengthen your security posture. I like it. Let's see. So I think we have one more thing. And I feel like this is like the most important piece of the entire talk, but I could be wrong. I could be biased. So Alice, talk to me about the biggest security threat today.
So the biggest security threat that you didn't know about are squirrels today. Apparently they cause a lot of outages, and actually other animals too.
Yes, they do. And with that, I actually wanted to share with everyone before we go to the question slide that we're not lying. There's a whole website that is dedicated to this, in case you are curious. And if you want to see the little acorn and where they impact directly, there you have it. So a fun little project from some of our security friends and what they are doing in the world today to keep all of us safe from the mighty squirrel. All right, so with that, it is off to questions. And for anyone who wants resources later, we had some links throughout, but we also have additional links where we talked about OPA, OWASP, plain language, and of course, squirrels, which is terribly important.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And all right.
Hi.
No, they're real squirrels, Fernando. There is actually somebody who tracks all the cyber attacks. There was actually a I think it was a significant one in, I want to say, Vancouver, BC. And it was because a beaver was making their dam and chewed through the fiber line and took everything out. So they do literally track all of that and some of the challenges that nature can cause from a cyber issue. So with that, does anyone have any questions? It is cooler. and that was from there's a hacker Slack group that someone actually maintains that, and they track it year over year. So the link, you can actually look for all animals versus squirrels and where they happen, and you can break it down. So it's a fun little thing. The more important thing is, does anyone have any questions for Alice or myself? Probably more Alice than myself. I don't have to facilitate because she's right here live and in person. And in terms of what kind of things, how you might get started with setting up a security posture and kind of the moving beyond some of the basic stuff that we had talked about, or I had talked about last year. Oh, is there a Q&A section that people need to ask questions there? Or can we just do it in chat? I feel like we can do it in chat.
Yeah, there's nothing Q&A I can see. So
Okay.
we monitor both. Are there existing OSS communities that successfully shift security to the left, even if it's just a little bit? I'm pretty sure there are, but I haven't actually monitored a lot of these OSS projects. I know like certain ones with the Apache Foundation, they do some of this security things because for part of it, it's like it's part of their CI process. Let's just put it this way. So, but it's like to various extents, right? Like some of them just do license scanning. Some of them do a little bit more. They do, code scanning, and I think it really kind of depends on how, just how everybody does it together. Like I would say your best bet if you want to look at it is probably look at an OSS security project. They really do need to mitigate like their risk earlier in the process, or as early as possible, right? Because they're trying to create a project for security. So it would be rather ironic if they didn't do any of this stuff like in their project.
And I do know that Kubernetes does a really good job with their security SIG. I follow a number of people, and whether or not they have how far left, I'm like they are shifting. I do know that they have a very strong sense of collaboration, community, and cross function, bringing in those cross functions in there. And I view them as being like a very good example as well. So, and the people are fantastic and are willing to help you and talk to you if you have questions. So if you're working on that at all with the project, they're delightful. And I do know that Jason McIntosh is doing a great job with, I continue to track what he does for Spinnaker, and he's been doing a good job of trying to get that cross-team collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the crowd? Anyone working on building out a security posture right now and have additional resources that would be interesting to share with the group? Or it's just, that lunchtime lull, post-lunch lull. All right. I guess I forget how long we have. Like, we can certainly hang out.
We have 2 more minutes.
We only have 2 more minutes. So if you have any more questions, you've got to make it fast. Otherwise, you can also spend time checking out Cyber Squirrel, because I find that endlessly delightful. And also, I just want everyone to understand the restraint that I was able to have out of respect for Alice, that I didn't cover everything. Keanu Reeves, there was only one picture, and there was only one picture for hackers. So thank Alice. She made that happen for you. All right. I think I don't know. That's great. I know I was supposed to come up with a couple of seeded questions for everyone, and I didn't, because I'm a slacker. I think for me, it's just a matter of understanding in talking about plain language, how many people are actually moving towards using plain language, and have you seen that work? Have you seen that shift of going from strong security language to plain language, and other people's ability to actually participate in the security process? So
yeah, I would say a good indication of that is like if security sends you like a CVE report, like, do you even understand like what that report is actually telling you? Like, and what is the, how do we mitigate the things in the report? If you can't figure that out without pestering them and asking them a million questions, it is not in plain language.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's kind of an important shift. I know a number of people within the security community are working really hard to kind of make things more approachable and make themselves more approachable. And so I guess in closing, I would just say, if you're not actually in security, be open to reaching out to your security team. As Alice said, ask questions. Ask all the questions. They want the questions. Because if you might have something that you think is insignificant, but it turns out to be something that's fairly significant. And you're going to make a big difference by asking that. And then they know how to educate the teams more effectively. So don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. More questions they have, the better they can come up with these answers beforehand, among other things. And that might also then prompt them to move to more plain language, like reports and that type of stuff when communicating with everybody else too, because they shouldn't want to be doing or answering the same questions over and over and over and over again if they can help it, right? So like it's like you need to give them the feedback that we do not understand what on earth you just said.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, I guess that's it. So unless anyone has any other questions, thanks, Fernando, for asking the questions. And thanks, everybody, for participating. And thank you, Alice, for sharing all of your wisdom. It's always delightful.
No, I'm glad to be here.
Bye.
Bye.